Okay, so get this. Picture a peaceful Texas town, where life is slow, and then suddenly, bam, a double homicide rocks the town, and everyone's a suspect.
Wow.
We're diving into the Kaufman County murders,
Oh, yeah.
a revenge plot straight out of
He
Hollywood.
shared it.
You sent over a ton of material, news articles, court documents, even some stuff from a true crime TV show.
It's a lot.
Talk about a rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's fascinating, though. What's really intriguing here is that the victims weren't just everyday people.
Right.
They were prominent law enforcement officials.
Yeah.
This wasn't just some random act of violence.
Uh-huh.
It was a calculated attack that sent shockwaves through the whole community and beyond.
Right. It's like something out of a crime novel. Small town, everyone knows everyone.
Yeah.
Suddenly gripped by fear and paranoia.
Exactly. And that's what makes this case so captivating.
Yeah.
It challenges our assumptions about safety and justice.
Yeah, really.
It forces us to confront that darker side of human nature.
Okay, so let's start by getting to know the players in this whole tragedy.
Okay. First up, we've got Mark Hasse, an assistant district attorney known for being tough on organized crime.
Yeah, he's a dedicated prosecutor, someone who really believed in upholding the law.
Hmm.
And then there's Mike McLelland, the district attorney,
Right.
and his wife, Cynthia.
Okay.
Mike was a seasoned lawman, a reputation for being fair but firm.
And Cynthia, from what I've gathered, she was like the heart of the courthouse.
Yeah, she was known for her warmth and kindness.
Yeah, always baking for the office.
Yeah, it's those little details
I
that
mean,
make this whole thing so much more heartbreaking.
it really is.
Yeah.
It all started on January 31st, 2013.
Okay.
Mark Hasse was walking to the courthouse when a gunman in tactical gear just opened fire in broad daylight.
Oh, wow.
Killed him instantly.
In broad daylight.
A witness even heard Hasse say, "I'm sorry," right before the shots rang out.
Really?
What do you make of that?
That's a curious element, isn't it?
Yeah. It suggests some kind of personal connection, maybe an attempt to reconcile or explain something, in those final moments.
Yeah,
It definitely adds another layer of complexity to the case.
totally. And it fueled a lot of speculation early on.
Right.
People were terrified. Was this a hit by organized crime? Was it related to Hasse's work?
The community, especially those in law enforcement, they were on high alert.
Yeah.
There was a very real sense of who could be next.
And then just 2 months later, Mike and Cynthia McLelland were found shot to death in their own home.
Oh my gosh.
Over 20 rounds fired. It was a bloodbath.
Terrible.
And to think Cynthia was getting ready for Easter celebrations.
Oh, that's awful.
so brutal.
Yeah, the brutality of those murders really shook the community. It went from a sense of unease to outright panic.
Yeah,
People were genuinely afraid to leave their homes.
I bet.
The authorities were under immense pressure to find the killer, and quickly.
So where did investigators even start? Did they have any leads?
Initially, they focused on organized crime and white supremacist groups,
Oh.
specifically the Aryan Brotherhood, given Hasse and McLelland's history of prosecuting them.
I can see why they'd go down that route.
Right. It seemed logical at the time. And there's a chilling coincidence of the murder of a Colorado corrections official by a white supremacist group around the same time. It seemed to fit a pattern.
Yeah, but it turns out that was a red herring.
It was
The real culprit was closer to home.
closer to home.
Someone with a personal vendetta.
Oh, wow.
Enter Eric Williams,
Okay.
a former justice of the peace who had been prosecuted by Hasse and McLelland for stealing computer monitors.
And this wasn't just a slap on the wrist.
Right.
He lost his job, his law license,
Wow.
essentially his entire career.
Yeah.
This case had completely derailed his life, at least from his perspective.
So we're talking about a man with a serious grudge.
Yeah.
But how did they connect him to the murders?
Well, investigators discovered that Williams had been caught lying about accessing a database that contained the victims' home addresses.
Oh, that's not a good look.
Not at all. And it gets even more bizarre.
Okay.
Anonymous Crime Stoppers tips claiming responsibility for the murders were traced back to him.
What?
He was practically taunting the authorities.
So that's more than just holding a grudge.
Yeah.
It seems like he wanted to play a cat and mouse game with the investigators. Like, what was he thinking?
That's a great question, and it really gets to the heart of the wound collector psychology,
Okay.
which we'll delve into more later.
Okay.
But in Williams' case, it seems like he was reveling in the chaos he created, deriving a sense of power from the fear and uncertainty he was inflicting.
Wow. Talk about a twisted sense of satisfaction.
Yeah.
But the real turning point in the investigation came from a rather unexpected source, right?
You're talking about the tip from Williams' former colleague in the National Guard
Yes.
about a suspicious storage unit.
It's like something out of a movie.
I know.
They get this tip and bam! They find a white Ford Crown Victoria matching the one seen at both crime scenes.
And not just the car. The storage unit was like a villain's lair.
Oh, wow.
It contained this massive arsenal of weapons, police gear, even homemade napalm.
It's insane.
It was clear that this was no ordinary criminal. This was someone who had meticulously planned and prepared for these attacks.
All this time, this arsenal of weaponry was just sitting there waiting to be used. It's almost too crazy to believe.
Yeah.
But it gets even wilder, right?
It does.
Tell me about Kim Williams.
Ah, yes. Kim Williams, Eric's wife, and a key player in this whole saga.
Okay.
In a shocking twist, she agreed to testify against her husband.
Wait, hold on. His own wife turned against him? What happened there?
Her confession is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
She painted a disturbing picture of their toxic relationship and the cold-blooded planning behind these murders.
Oh, wow.
According to Kim, they rehearsed the killings, she embraced his anger as her own, and they even celebrated with steaks after Hasse's murder.
Whoa, hold up. Celebrated. That's chilling. It's like they were completely detached from the reality of what they had done. Like, what kind of person celebrates after taking the life?
This brings us back to the concept of the wound collector.
Okay.
As we'll explore later,
Yeah.
this term describes individuals who harbor this deep resentment and become fixated on revenge for perceived injustices.
So in Eric Williams's mind, Hasse and McLelland weren't just individuals. They
Wow.
were symbols of everything he'd lost, and taking their lives was his twisted way of righting the wrongs he felt he'd suffered.
Exactly. It's a chilling example of how unresolved anger and a desire for retribution can lead to devastating consequences.
This is heavy stuff, but before we dive deeper into the psychology of a wound collector, let's talk about the legal outcome.
Okay.
What happened to Eric and Kim Williams?
Well, Eric Williams was ultimately sentenced to death for Cynthia McLelland's murder. Prosecutors decided not to pursue additional trials for the other two victims.
Wow, a death sentence, it sounds like. The prosecutors felt that one was enough to represent the gravity of his crimes.
Indeed. And Kim, as part of her plea deal for testifying against Eric, received a 40-year sentence for her role as an accomplice. So in the end, this quest for revenge didn't just destroy the lives of the victims, it also led to the downfall of Eric and Kim Williams.
It's a classic case of the punishment doesn't fit the crime. At least not in the way they expected.
Right.
They sought to inflict pain and ended up in prison both physically and emotionally.
That's a really insightful observation. It's almost Shakespearean, this idea of revenge ultimately consuming those who seek it.
Right. But let's back up a bit. You mentioned this term wound collector earlier. Can you unpack that a little more for me?
Sure. A wound collector, as the term suggests, is someone who accumulates perceived injustices,
Okay.
real or imagined, and holds on to them, allowing them to fester and grow. They become fixated on these wounds, constantly reliving the pain and seeking retribution.
So it's not just about holding a grudge.
Right.
It's about letting that grudge define you.
Yeah.
It becomes a part of your identity.
Precisely, these individuals often see themselves as victims, constantly wronged by others, and they feel entitled to compensation for their suffering.
Yeah.
The need for revenge becomes all-consuming.
And in Eric Williams' case, it sounds like losing his job and law license was the final straw, the tipping point that sent him over the edge.
Right. That incident in his mind became the ultimate symbol of all the injustices he felt he had endured, and those who prosecuted him, Hasse and McLelland, they became the targets of his rage.
Okay, I'm starting to understand the psychology here, but it still seems so extreme. Do all wound collectors resort to violence?
Not necessarily. While some, like Eric Williams, may act out violently, others might find more subtle ways to seek revenge,
Okay.
sabotaging someone's career, spreading rumors, or simply withdrawing from all social contact.
So it's more about the fixation on past grievances rather than a specific action.
Exactly. The key identifier is this overwhelming sense of being wronged and a consuming desire for retribution.
This is all pretty heavy stuff. It makes you wonder, are there warning signs, red flags that we can look out for in people who might be heading down this dangerous path?
That's a really important question. And while it's not always easy to predict who might become violent, there are some common traits among wound collectors that we should be aware of.
Like what?
Well, they often have a history of blaming others for their problems.
Okay.
They tend to hold grudges for a long time, even over seemingly minor issues.
Yeah.
And they may display a pattern of seeking revenge in various aspects of their lives.
So it's not just about one incident, it's a pattern of behavior.
Right. And while we should be careful not to jump to conclusions or label everyone who holds a grudge as a potential wound collector, it's important to recognize these patterns and to intervene early on, especially if we're concerned about someone's mental health or potential for violence.
And this is all starting to make a lot more sense. But what about the community? How did they cope with this tragedy?
The Kaufman County murders had a profound impact on the community. People were traumatized, their sense of safety shattered.
Yeah.
They were forced to confront the reality that even in a small, tight-knit community, violence could erupt unexpectedly.
I can only imagine the fear and anxiety that must have gripped the town. Did life ever go back to normal?
It's never truly normal after something like this.
Mm-hmm.
But the community did show remarkable resilience. They came together to support one another, they demanded justice, and they refused to let fear paralyze them.
That's inspiring. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there's hope and strength and unity. But this case wasn't just a local tragedy.
Right.
It made national headlines, sparked debates about the death penalty, and raised concerns about the safety of public officials. What kind of impact did this have on a broader scale?
You're right. The Kaufman County murders went beyond local news. The fact that law enforcement officials were targeted sent shockwaves across the country.
Yeah.
It forced people to confront the reality that those who dedicate their lives to upholding the law are often at risk, putting themselves in harm's way for the greater good.
It's a sobering reminder that justice isn't without its risks. But it also brings up a more troubling question. What if Eric Williams hadn't been caught?
Yeah.
What if he had carried out his plan to target other officials?
That's a chilling thought, and it underscores the gravity of this case. Williams had compiled a hit list, which included a judge he planned to torture with napalm.
Oh my gosh.
The consequences could have been far more devastating.
It's hard to even imagine the level of pain and suffering he was willing to inflict. But thankfully, the investigation was successful.
Right.
The authorities were able to connect the dots, uncover the evidence, and ultimately bring him to justice.
And we can't overlook the role of technology in this investigation.
Right.
From surveillance footage that captured the getaway car to the database searches that revealed Williams's lies, technology played a crucial role in piecing together the truth.
It's amazing how our digital footprints can reveal so much about us, even our darkest secrets. But in this case, those digital breadcrumbs led to justice being served.
Absolutely, and it's a testament to the dedication of law enforcement officials who work tirelessly to solve these crimes and bring a sense of closure to the community.
Speaking of the community, I'm curious about the aftermath. How do you rebuild trust after something like this? How do you move forward when the very foundation of your community has been shaken?
That's a complex question, and there's no easy answer. Healing takes time, and it involves a collective effort.
Yeah.
It requires open communication support for those who are struggling and a commitment to creating a safer environment for everyone.
Yeah, it sounds like a long and difficult process, but I'm struck by the resilience of the human spirit. Even in the face of tragedy, people find ways to heal, to rebuild, and to move forward.
It's truly remarkable, and in this case, the Kaufman County community received an outpouring of support from across the nation. People were horrified by what had happened, and they wanted to help in any way they could.
That's heartwarming to hear, but I imagine there were also challenges. I'm thinking specifically about the media coverage. Cases like this tend to attract a lot of attention, which can be a double-edged sword, right?
Absolutely. On the one hand, media attention can keep the pressure on authorities to find the perpetrators and bring them to justice.
Yeah.
It can also raise awareness about important issues, like the dangers faced by law enforcement officials and the warning signs of wound collector behavior.
But too much media scrutiny can also be harmful, right? It can create a frenzy that makes it difficult to conduct a fair and impartial investigation, and it can re-traumatize the victims' families and the community as a whole.
You're spot on. And there's always the risk of sensationalism, where the focus shifts from the facts of the case to the more dramatic or shocking elements,
Right.
which can distort public perception and even influence the outcome of a trial.
It's a delicate balance. And speaking of trials, this case brought up a lot of debate about the death penalty, especially since Eric Williams was sentenced to death. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a complex issue with no easy answers. The death penalty is a deeply divisive topic, and this case certainly brought those divisions to the forefront.
Yeah.
Some people believe that it's a just punishment for certain crimes, while others view it as cruel and inhumane, regardless of the circumstances.
It's a debate that has been going on for centuries, and it's not likely to be resolved anytime soon. But Cases like this force us to grapple with those difficult questions, to examine our own beliefs about justice and punishment.
And it's crucial to remember that these conversations need to happen within a larger context.
Yeah.
We need to consider the historical context,
Yeah.
the racial disparities in the application of the death penalty, and the very real possibility of wrongful convictions.
Those are all critical points.
Oh,
We can't talk about justice without acknowledging the systemic issues that have historically prevented it from being applied fairly and equitably.
exactly. And it's important to remember the human cost of these decisions.
Yeah.
Not just for the victims and their families,
Right.
but also for the families of those convicted, even for the most heinous crimes. The ripple effects of violence are far-reaching and long-lasting.
It's a stark reminder that true justice isn't just about punishment.
No, it's not.
It's about healing accountability and creating a system that works for everyone.
I couldn't agree more. It's about addressing the root causes of violence, supporting those who have been harmed, and working to prevent future tragedies.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Kaufman County murders, what are the key takeaways you hope our listener will remember?
Well, first and foremost, I think this case highlights the devastating consequences of unresolved anger and the destructive nature of revenge. It's a cautionary tale about the importance of addressing our emotional wounds and seeking healthy ways to cope with conflict.
It's also a reminder that violence can erupt anywhere, even in seemingly peaceful communities.
Right.
We can't afford to be complacent. We need to be aware of the warning signs, and we need to be proactive in creating a safer environment for everyone.
Absolutely. And finally, I think this case underscores the importance of community resilience and hope.
Hmm.
Even in the face of unimaginable tragedy, people can come together, support one another, and find ways to heal and rebuild.
That's a powerful message, and one that I think we can all take comfort in this case. Has been a roller coaster of emotions, from shock and horror to sadness and anger. But ultimately, it's a story about the human spirit's ability to overcome adversity.
Well said, and I think it's important to leave our listener with a sense of hope. Yes, there is darkness in the world,
Yeah.
but there is also light, and it's up to each of us to choose which path we follow.
That's a perfect note to end on. Thank you for taking this deep dive with me. It's been enlightening, to say the least.
It has been.
And to our listener out there, we hope this exploration of the Kaufman County murders has provided you with some valuable insights into the complexities of human behavior, the nature of justice, and the power of resilience.
And if this case has sparked your curiosity, we encourage you to continue exploring. There are countless resources available, books, articles, documentaries that delve deeper into the topics we've touched on today.
Yes.
The pursuit of knowledge and understanding is an ongoing journey, and we applaud you for taking the first step.